Welcome back to our special show where we are tracking the Prime Minister's visit, which is just about to start. He'll be landing very soon in Lao PDR in Vientiane, and we've been talking about it with our guests as well. Senior Diplomat Ambassador S.R. Tile with us in our studio. Dr. Satoru Nagao, fellow Hudson Institute, has joined us from Tokyo. We also have Shruti Pantadai now with us, fellow Southeast Asia and Oceania Center, MPIDSA. Good morning to you as well. Shruti, what do you think about how India and ASEAN have taken their ties forward now, getting into really the brass tacks of ensuring that the Indo-Pacific region is truly free for navigation and is moving towards progress for all, which is the vision that Prime Minister Modi also had when he talked about Act East and Sagar.
Right. Good morning. Thanks very much for having me join your broadcast. It's indeed a special day as Prime Minister Modi travels for the ASEAN summit and related engagements, because, you know, as if you've seen what the Prime Minister's visit briefing sort of tried to highlight, was that Prime Minister Modi's vision for the Indo-Pacific and what India has been calling an inclusive vision of the Indo-Pacific has always placed ASEAN as its heart and center of the effort. If you remember, right before the G20 summit was held in India, actually Prime Minister Modi traveled to Indonesia for the ASEAN summit, again highlighting the importance of the ASEAN-led mechanisms for India in pushing for this inclusive vision for the Indo-Pacific forward. Having said that, Prime Minister Modi's visit comes at a time, as you've been discussing in your broadcast, of very polarizing sort of polycrisis and global competition. So can India actually carry forward the legacy of being a bridge builder in this polarized world is going to be how Prime Minister Modi is going to chart many of his engagements. If you've seen to the various processes that we've done so far, whether it's our engagement at the Quad, whether what we did with the visit of the Prime Minister to Singapore and Brunei, is to sort of create this network of partnerships along with like-minded countries in the Indo-Pacific, and to ask them that, yes, China is, remember, a very important economic partner for the ASEAN. So instead of asking them to choose sides, what you're trying to create is options for them to go forward. So whether it's infrastructure, the digital public infrastructure piece that we are pushing forward so effectively, or connectivity, and the positive agenda in operationalizing the public goods mandate is something that's going to be of continued focus.
Shruti, now considering the current geopolitical aspirations of these ASEAN nations, because you also spoke about what's happening at this juncture, geopolitically speaking, how do you see India's role in this particular summit under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi to build that, that environment of strategic trust in the region, and particularly Indo-Pacific? India as a balancer, India as a neutral voice. Your thoughts?
Right, thank you. I think the idea is going to be to push how India can help in capacity building of these nations, because, like I said, you have nations which, if you saw the ASEAN survey that comes out of the ICS Institute every year, it's not particularly promising, despite the kind of work that US and like-minded partners, including India, have done for the region, because the survey still reflects the ground realities, which is a growing and imbalanced sort of economic dependencies that these nations have towards China. So you can't, here what you're trying to say is, okay, you have created these economic dependencies. How can we help you balance against that? I think the idea is to generate those options. So like I said, so the key pillars are going to be to, of course, help them build equitable sort of governance platforms for them to deal with China. Right now, I think one of the questions was on the provocations of the South China Sea.
Right.
So here what India has been saying is that we should help socialize the UNCLOS, workshop, create these legal competencies for you. So I think some of the conversations are going to go in that direction.
All right. Let me bring in Dr. Satoru Nagao again. Dr. Nagao, just want to find out, in terms of how cohesive is the ASEAN itself, how much on one page is it itself in terms of how it sees India's role, and especially where India is seeking that trade should in some way be rebalanced? Because if you look at exports and imports, ASEAN nations export almost twice as much to India than India does to ASEAN. That is an area where we've been seeking some sort of a balance and some realignment of how these FTAs have been carried forward.
Dr. Nagao, if you could just, yes, go ahead.
Hello? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, many countries try to improve the relation with the same country as a one group, but at the same time, the currently we are facing is indeed ASEAN is 10 separate countries. So that's why how to improve trade and sustainable trade, very safe trade. That is a topic, but at the same time, because of China's provocations, this is under threat. And so bilaterally, one by one, India agree as a FTA, and of course with ASEAN, of course they also agree. But at the same time, indeed, real situations happen in the bilateral negotiation. So when we talk about this kind of the multinational negotiation, that itself is very important, but at the same time, main agreement has happened as a side event of this big event, bilaterally, trilaterally, and quadrilaterally. So one by one, we should improve and neutralize China's influence and expand our cooperation with countries in ASEAN. That has happened. Especially Myanmar, the big problem, but Vietnam, Philippines, improving our relation with India and other Quad members, that has also happened. And how to persuade Indonesia, biggest regional country in ASEAN. Right. These are very important. Singapore, financial and information center in this region, that is also influential. One by one, we need to do that.
Okay, so a very quick follow-up and a very brief and simple follow-up question on the basis of Dr. Nagao's answer, that so for the rest of the ASEAN as well as dialogue partners, what makes India under the current ruling dispensation important for them? So what all does India bring to the table today and tomorrow? And
I just wanted to add that the PM's plane has landed in Vientiane.
Okay.
We'll get the images in just a bit.
I think on economy, India has not signed the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. But we have an FTA with ASEAN. We have bilateral trade relations with all the 10 countries. So last time when Prime Minister spoke in Indonesia, he said that the FTA with ASEAN should be revised in a time-bound manner. Now India is already the 5th largest economy. It is going to be the 3rd largest economy. And on the whole world is worried about the Chinese overcapacity.
Okay.
So the countries, Europe, US, they will be moving China +1 or whatever. There India will have a very big role. And since the ASEAN countries, some of them are very much part of these global value chains, they would very much like that when India also becomes part of those global value chains, then their importance does not decline. And
because it's about diversifying these value chains, right. And that has a very important interlink with investments as well. Even investments from ASEAN in India are pretty skewed. More than 90% only comes from Singapore.
Because there is a certain advantage, there is a certain bilateral
so it's organic
Singapore.
Or something else?
It is, but it is third-party investment. The third countries open a company in Singapore and then investment is from there. But that is, India is also investing. In Indonesia, there is a lot of investment in raw materials and mining. And so that will continue to happen depending on interdependence. But how can such partnerships be augmented, can be strengthened and can help both the countries, both the sides. I think that is very, very important. That since India is moving towards Atmanirbhar Bharat, and how other ASEAN countries also become part of this India growth story. They are very keen on it, and that is how all these visits, the bilateral relationship, PM went to Brunei, to Singapore, these things help. These are building blocks, and for
we've
very
clearly increased our engagements with them.
very, very clear.
Yes, and there's a message. But having said that, how do you think, we do know that the ASEAN, some of the ASEAN nations, they still remain divided over how to deal with China. Now, China is important for many of them.
Even Myanmar for that matter.
Exactly, and in the presser yesterday, there were indications by the India's MEA that Myanmar issue will come up in the East Asia Summit. But anyway, we'll stick to ASEAN right now. Navigating those difficult conversations, like we have discussed China since morning multiple times, but do you think when the leadership sits on the common table, there's not going to be much of a China talk, but there is much more? Like, how do you see this?
See, the whole world says the centrality of ASEAN as far as East Asia is concerned, because there is no other organization. But somehow ASEAN has not been very cohesive in its decision making and has not been very decisive.
Because of these divisions?
Because
of the regional aspirations of certain nations?
Yes, there are 2 or 3 countries which are
I think that's an important point.
Economically dependent on China.
Yeah.
That they sometimes fail to take a position which is obvious to all the other countries, whether it is aggression against Philippines in South China Sea or against Vietnam, and in Myanmar again there is a lot of difference of opinion, but I think in
because
Myanmar
now from the presidency of Jakarta, which was the last time, and the presidency of Lao PDR, the approach to Myanmar has changed. Now a representative will also be there.
at least Myanmar sent a representative, but they have not invited the Tatmadaw chief.
Generals.
But since the Myanmar regime seems to be weakening in some ways, they are losing territory, they are losing control, so perhaps they are also looking for some accommodation with all those forces which are
and how
opposing.
critical is resolving the situation in Myanmar to India's own interest? Because one big thrust area is connectivity.
The whole
that India wants to strengthen.
Trilateral highway
there are 2
is
projects.
now in a very difficult domain, because it cannot pass through Myanmar. Earlier also the work was very slow. The Indian part is ready, Thailand of course was ready. But now, because of all these unrest, that seems to be very, very difficult. So for India, it is very important.
Okay, I just want to quickly take this point to Shruti Pandalai, and I'm very keen to know her thoughts on it. And then we take a short break and take this to Dr. Satur also. Shruti, if you could just add your thoughts to what Ambassador had to say about China being the sticky / contentious issue. We've been talking about it. There have been differences of opinions how to deal or not try to deal with China. But in this edition, on this summit, do you think that's not going to be a prime discourse?
Because some of the ASEAN constituents are unwilling to call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
Well, let me just say that I think what will be key for India is to have a reassuring role in this ASEAN sort of summit. Remember where it's happening. It's happening in Lao PDR. It has a huge amount of investment coming in from China. It's benefited greatly from the Belt and Road Initiative. So I think India is sensitive enough to understand the pre-existing sensitivities that will be in play when the summit is held. I think what India's role would be is to clearly say that, okay, last year when we had a 12-point sort of like, here's what we've achieved in a year, here are the practical outcomes, whether it's on the green fund, whether it's on the investment fund, whether it's on the digital public infrastructure fund. And so let's play that bridging role. Let's see how we can amp up our trade and investments and build connectivity going forward.
Okay, Shruti, I request you to stay with us, and Dr. Nagao, we're taking a very short break. Please don't go away. We're going to take this discussion forward on a special broadcast. Prime Minister Modi in Lao on the other side will take this forward, and don't go away. We'll be back.
Yeah, he's landed there, and we'll bring those pictures to you as well.
Visuals first on DD India.
Very smashing welcome he'll get from the Indian diaspora there too. Stay with us.
Okay, so Niharika, कल वाला जो
complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked, we just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Extreme weather events are going to get more frequent and intense. What can we do? Here are some ideas.
In each of the grid, we installed rain gauges and we identified local people from the villages, and these people were given training how to measure rainfall, and every day these farmers used to give rainfall data into a WhatsApp group that we had created called Vientiane Weather Forecast.
Sweden started very early to cut out fossil fuels from our energy mix. So that also shows that big, bold changes are possible.
There are 5 to 6 families who have joined us on this journey towards self-sufficiency. We also exchange products and goods.
If we use cork instead of these materials, which are not renewable, cork is, we are decreasing several orders of magnitude.
Welcome to Chandigarh.
Thanks for staying with us on DD India this morning on the special broadcast. Prime Minister in Laos, where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as per latest reports, has already landed in Vientiane, the capital of Laos, to embark on a two-day visit. He's on a two-day visit in the capital of Laos PDR to attend the India-ASEAN summit. And ahead of his departure, this is what Prime Minister had to say, because this is important as this sets the tone and the tenor, the broader agenda of Prime Minister's attendance at the ASEAN summit. So let's take a look at the departure statement. Prime Minister issued a statement earlier, and I quote, Prime Minister said, "Today I am embarking on a two-day visit to Vientiane, Laos PDR at the invitation of the Prime Minister Sonsai Sifandon to participate in the 21st ASEAN-India and 19th East Asia Summit."
Yes, and he said that this year we are marking a decade of our Act East policy. I'll join the ASEAN leaders to review progress in our comprehensive strategic partnership and chart the future direction of our cooperation.
He added that East Asia Summit will provide an opportunity to deliberate on the challenges to peace, stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region.
He further said we share close cultural and civilizational ties with the region, including with Laos PDR, which are enriched by shared heritage of Buddhism and Ramayana.
Prime Minister added that he looks forward to his meetings with the Lao PDR leadership to further strengthen the bilateral ties.
He's also said that he's confident that this visit will further deepen the engagement that India has with the ASEAN nations.
Let's also once again introduce our panel on the show, especially for the benefit of the viewers who have just tuned into this special broadcast. In our Delhi studio, we have Ambassador Tayal with us. We are joined live from Tokyo in Japan. Dr. Satoru Nagao and Shruti continues to be with us. And Shruti, thank you for standing by. I'm going to come to you in a bit, but let's also revisit what Prime Minister had to, in fact, this 12-point proposal that Prime Minister talked about in the previous edition of the ASEAN Summit in Jakarta. These are the high points of that. Okay, we are going to play that as well, but this is just on your screens, the overview of what makes this visit important and the itinerary of Prime Minister's ASEAN-India Summit at the Lao PDR, which looks at further strengthening India-ASEAN comprehensive partnership and how ASEAN plays central role in India's regional strategy. We're talking about the overall agenda, where focus is going to be clearly on the deepening economic ties and also boosting defense cooperation, and a lot of emphasis, as mentioned by the MA yesterday, on fintech and cultural and civilizational linkages are very, very important, and how India-ASEAN relationship is critical in maintaining peace and stability in Indo-Pacific, besides strengthening the overall spectrum of the strategic partnerships, India and rest of the ASEAN nations. And India clearly looks forward to consolidate its role as a key player in Southeast Asia region, where ASEAN clearly remains an essential partner and integral part as far as India's Act East policy is concerned. And 2024 interestingly celebrates the key diplomatic milestones also, marking this ASEAN-India Summit. This includes 75 years of relations with Indonesia and Philippines. That is also important. And also 60 years of diplomatic milestones with Singapore. We've seen how Prime Minister, in fact, took the relationship to the next level in the recent visit to Singapore. Recent multilateral agreements have been signed with Vietnam, Malaysia and Singapore, which has taken this relationship with that part of the ASEAN countries to the next level. India has also elevated its ties with Malaysia and Singapore to comprehensive strategic partnership. And during this earlier visit of Prime Minister to Brunei, which was historical in many ways, India enhanced its relationship with Brunei to the next level. And India's pact with Singapore was also important on a semiconductor ecosystem partnership and more boost to regional connectivity and trade.
So there you have it. That's how Prime Minister Modi, in fact, put across to the ASEAN how India and ASEAN could take their ties forward in Jakarta. These covered 12 points, and sharing of India's digital public infrastructure stack with ASEAN partners was just one of them. There was also ASEAN-India Fund for Digital Future on cooperation in digital transformation and financial connectivity. He further said that supporting Economic and Research Institute of ASEAN and East Asia could further deepen ties between the two regions. And they also said that collectively raising issues of Global South in the multilateral fora is what something that PM proposed India and ASEAN should be doing together. He also invited ASEAN countries to join Global Center for Traditional Medicine, which is being set up by the World Health Organization in India. He gave a call for working together on Mission Life, which is something that the PM has come up with himself, how we can gel with the environment and take our lives forward. And sharing India's experience in affordable medicines through Jan Aushadhi Kendras is also something that the PM put forward. There's also the collective fight against terrorism, terror financing and cyber disinformation, which the PM wanted to take forward. The ASEAN nations, he invited ASEAN countries to join the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure as well, which is a global India initiative. He also gave a call for cooperation in disaster management, this region being hit by frequent storms. And there's a call for enhanced cooperation on maritime safety and security as well. This is the last point in the 12-point agenda, but perhaps the most important as well.
Sir, a quick one on this. This is a clear blueprint, a very forward-looking, inclusive, comprehensive approach. This is how India, in the years to come, will look to consolidate its ties with the ASEAN nations. What do you make of it?
This is very action oriented, and this is where India has strengths. Like when Prime Minister visited Brunei, the rupee that our rupee system of payment will be acceptable there and it will become operational. It was done in UAE, etc. also. And the entire digital infrastructure of Aadhaar and payments by scan and all that, that is something phenomenal that other countries of South and Asia, ASEAN, they can adopt, and we are providing all that software and expertise free to our partners.
Also digital benefit transfer.
Digital benefit transfer, it has been absolutely historical. So there is a lot of strength and traditional medicine again.
Yes, Jan Aushadhi.
Jan Aushadhi, how the margins can be reduced so that the medicines can be given at affordable cost to the beneficiaries, to the patients. So India has gained a lot of experience and India is ready to share that experience. Then traditional medicine also, all these chemicals and they ultimately harm the body, the allopathic medicine. So if there can be more natural medicine, more yoga or exercises or plant-based medicines that helps a human body, and India has experience and is ready to share and also get experience of other, like in Laos, Vietnam, they have their own traditional medicines. So the entire, all the 12 points.
And do we have, if I could take this to Shruti Pandalai, do we have any measure of how these ASEAN nations have responded to these 12 proposals? Because a lot of it also gets reflected in how, again we come back to trade, how trade is conducted between India and these ASEAN countries, where we still talk about certain tariff and non-tariff barriers, especially for Indian pharmaceuticals, and which could also apply to traditional medicine.
Right. I think you've hit the nail on the head with that question, because I think one of the things under review in the ASEAN-India sort of trade conversations was backdoor monopolies by companies which therefore allow for exploitative practices from big sort of economies, including that of China, and how badly they impact Indian markets, and not having that sort of reciprocity going forward for India's sort of interests. I think that's a conversation still in progress. However, what the financial connectivity element that the Prime Minister has proposed and which was discussed by the Ambassador in terms of the UPI, in terms of what the digital stack can bring in terms of the ease of business and the ease of conduct of business, I think those are thick conversations that Prime Minister's visit and also the subsequent work that has happened before his visit and the implementation of many of these outcomes will be focusing on.
Okay, Dr. Nagao, this year also interestingly marks the decade of India's Act East policy. How do you evaluate this whole transition or a decade from Look East to Act East in terms of India's approach towards ASEAN being not really confined to diplomatic jargons, but really action-oriented, considering those 12 points that we elaborated right now. In fact, now we're going to first break on DD India, the arrival shots of Prime Minister Narendra Modi at Lao PDR. Prime Minister Modi arrived a while back. These are the visuals at the Vientiane, the capital of Lao PDR. It's a two-day visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to participate in the India-ASEAN summit today, and tomorrow being the East Asia summit. Prime Minister Modi will be attending the 21st ASEAN-India summit today.
So there you have it, a bit of a ceremonial dimension to this arrival as well, with that guard of honor and a warm welcome with a bouquet of flowers for Prime Minister Modi in Lao PDR in Vientiane. And lots in store, busy day ahead lies for Prime Minister Modi, because pretty soon he will be greeted by a contingent of the Indian diaspora as well, and he will get to see the kind of civilizational, historical, civilizational, ancient connection that India has with Lao PDR in a rendition of the Ramayana in the Lao PDR way as well. That is also something that is set to take place today, apart from, of course, the heavy-duty engagements that he has throughout the day as
Talking about Prime Minister's engagements on day one, he will be meeting the Indian diaspora upon his arrival. The red carpet welcome accorded to India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It is going to be his 10th attendance at the ASEAN summit, and today he would be given a welcome ceremony or recorded a ceremonial welcome ceremony at the hotel upon his arrival, followed by a Laotian Ramayana performance. In fact, one of the events that takes the center stage, reiterating or underscoring the strong historical and civilizational linkages that India shares with Lao PDR, and talking about the hardcore diplomacy. Well, today, as per the official engagements are concerned of India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he will first attend the 21st ASEAN-India summit later in the day, and that will also be followed by important bilateral meetings with his counterparts from Japan and New Zealand, reportedly.
I believe that rendition of the Ramayana in the Laotian style is quite a sight as well, Ambassador Tayal, because we get to see elements that we can really identify, and then that at the same time it's extremely artistic, and it sort of has an interconnect with the kind of traditional or even the kind of dances that we have, classical dances that we have in India.
And their costumes are so flamboyant, and their rendering. In fact, once I had attended a ASEAN reception where there are a lot of cultural presentations.
Yes.
But and the 5 countries there had excerpts from Ramayana in their cultural presentation. Singapore, Indonesia, Cambodia, Thailand, and one more. So that shows how much is the outreach, but they have their own versions, and their traditions change, and story varies a little bit.
This strong civilizational connect
very,
that
very
India shares with Thailand, with Cambodia,
yes.
and talking about this.
And Buddhism is another very strong
absolutely.
bridge.
Yes. This the Lao version of Ramayana. Lao PDR in fact has issued a postage stamp which features Ram Lala of Ayodhya. Now,
yes.
it's very
and they
symbolic.
performed in Ayodhya as well.
Yes. Really?
Yes,
okay. Okay. So, I think, and this makes Lao PDR the first country to issue a stamp depicting the revered deity. It's very symbolic, but I think there is a message how India is central to, I wouldn't say the world heritage, but
and soft power is a very often used name. It's almost hackneyed now, but isn't that what it is? It is soft power as well.
Particularly in Laos, among the Laotian diplomats and others, I have seen there is a reverence towards India. There is a kind of, I shouldn't say, some kind of gratitude that this civilizational and spiritual thoughts came from India, which have nourished their country over generations.
Stamp.
So postage stamp is really a respect shown towards Indian civilization, people of India, and towards our Prime Minister of India.
Shruti, would you like to come in here? Laos being the first country in the world to issue a stamp depicting one of the most revered Indian deities. I mean, you've covered that part of the diplomacy and that part of the world, but this is historical and unprecedented in many ways, only reiterating how Lao PDR or some of the ASEAN nations really look up to India and look at India's...
Yeah, we just shifted gears from hardcore to soft power.
Yeah, a little bit more on the soft power, which is also taking a lot of prominence in this chapter of the summit, would you say?
I think, I think it speaks to Gautam's point and your point as well on how India brings to the sort of the global high table, not just its sort of cultural ethos, but the idea of India's soft power, the attractiveness of our culture. And at a time when the world is talking about sharp power, where, it's all about coercion, economic coercion, cultural sort of imposition, here is India sort of telling the world that we are your friends, and please, there is so much in our history that connects all of us. We speak of us as a civilizational sort of state. So obviously the linkages, like the ambassador in the studio said, are lived in everyday terms, and India does enjoy that sort of friendliness and that cultural connect with many of these countries in the ASEAN. And I think that actually has, to speak to your point earlier, been a focus of Prime Minister Modi's government. You spoke about the work done by the Archaeological Survey of India. A lot of these, again, the revival and the reach of India's Buddhist connect to the rest of this region are all been priorities. So I think India's sort of cultural attractiveness is always going to be a plus point for our relationship with the world.
Dr. Nagao, your thoughts? India's civilizational, cultural, historical linkages coming to the fore, even when we talk about hardcore diplomacy at the summitry. But this aspect is also, I mean, important, and how important?
And I'll bring in hardcore as well, because Dr. Naga, I'd like to answer to the contrast that again comes in between India and China here. Because India has a historical cultural connect, India does not claim any territory, but China does otherwise.
That's true. Cultural connectivity is one aspect India can emphasize. But cultural connection itself is not an improving point. How to exploit this is very important indeed. Because in the past, still we can find the cultural connection between India and ASEAN, or India and Japan, or India and other country in this region. But we haven't exploited this good situation a lot because we lack the fund. But now India is emerging. India is emerging means more fund, more resources India can use. That's why we can hold the cultural connecting event. We can reorganize all the temple, all the castles, all the heritages to prove we are connected. So that's why when we see the cultural connection, cultural connection is an important topic? Because we have financial power. Because we from the political background, we can, this is advantage. Cultural connection is advantage. So this is related to its policy. That we should not forget it. So now, for a long time, China has exploited the situation in the cultural connection between China and Southeast Asia, and by exploiting this, they expand territory. China's expanding territory has three features, including one aspect for which military policy and non-military policy is one set. They invest in infrastructure, they exploit the cultural connection to expand their territory. So that's why this is dangerous. India's way is completely different, more cooperative, more friendship.
Certainly. And in terms of again exploiting this, Ambassador, do you think that has been done to the extent that it's possible? Because if you look at how flows of tourism are there from India to Southeast Asian countries, a lot of Indians are traveling abroad, especially since the COVID phase got over. There was revenge tourism as well, and I think a lot of Southeast Asian countries were beneficiaries of that. Has India benefited to that extent? Has an effort been made so that there is a, I wouldn't say reciprocity, but there is an equivalent reverse flow of tourism from these countries to India as well, using the kind of connects that are already existing?
At one level, at the academic level, this has happened in many ways. Like Indian Council of Cultural Relations and Nalanda University has many scholars from all of these countries which have a strong connect. Now, India's tourists are going to these places, and their tourists are coming for Buddhist sites. It is a very substantial number which comes from Southeast Asian countries. To now that Ayodhya temple is constructed, I am sure it will be a very big draw, and a new tourist destination would come in the minds and the consciousness of people of Indian heritage and civilizational connect. So this is again, people are looking for something new, something different.
So this is your mini India, you can say. I mean, the colors of India.
That's in Vientiane, the people waiting for the PM's
This is the diaspora there. We have almost more than 40 million, as our Japanese colleague was mentioning. So no wonder they are very prominent in different parts of the world, and whether it is Rishi Sunak
Indian diaspora in ASEAN countries.
In ASEAN, in Singapore,
not so much in PDR,
Singapore and Malaysia.
Overall in ASEAN.
In Singapore and Malaysia, Singapore always the president, the finance minister is more or less always of Indian origin. So very prominent positions in particularly Singapore and Malaysia. I would say, the Indian diaspora. Numbers are also very large there.
We can also have Shruti's, I mean, I would like to read her mind on the presence of Indian diaspora, not only at the Lao PDR level, you know, but overall, Shruti, this diaspora element, 20%, that's what the numbers are, could be more than that, of the Indian diaspora that are spread across the ASEAN countries.
Sure, I think the diaspora has always had placed a very great sort of value for India's relationships globally, but it has been actually leveraged very effectively under Prime Minister Modi's administration. You just have to remember the shows which were almost like rock concerts, whether it's in Australia or the US. But I think it speaks to two things. It speaks to one, obviously the draw of Prime Minister Modi, not just domestically but globally, and the admiration of his leadership. Two, it is about sort of making the diaspora a part of the India story globally, and to help achieve in a non sort of threatening manner what India's relationship goals are with particular countries in the region. So whether it's trade, whether it's business, whether it's academics, whether it's people, you know, in cutting edge fields of technology, science, and research and development, we've been able to use the diaspora very effectively to build on those linkages. So I think that's going to be a continued peg of Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy outreach. Particularly for ASEAN, this is important because even though we've discussed the historical and sort of civilizational and cultural linkages, we've seen that we have not been able to build upon those effectively. So I think the diaspora, therefore, coming in with migration and mobility sort of compacts being designed by the foreign ministry with various governments, are going to help send our people become the ambassadors of India in these nations and also draw the relationship forward.
Right. The other, of course, the issue again is in terms of language too, where what we share perhaps is the English language with a lot of these ASEAN countries, Southeast Asian countries in general, Dr. Satura Nagor. But in terms of bringing people together more often and enhancing, intensifying connectivity, do you think there are areas that are still to be explored to ensure that this grows even further?
Okay, so in this case, I can compare the diaspora of the other country and the diaspora of India. We can find many elite in the Indian diaspora outside of India. That is one of the features. Elite, well educated, and the idea is very creative. So these elite are Indians in many countries. So that's why, indeed, when we talk about diaspora, number is one thing, but another one is quality. So the high-level people visit other country and show their performance, good performance, and everyone admits they are part of their friends. That has happened in many places in the world, especially the open society. So in India, of course, this is India's advantage, not other ethnic advantage, India's advantage. So that's why India's global connection, people-people connection, and cultural connection, that is very useful for India because of this. They can decide their policy. They can decide other countries' policy too. That's what happened.
Okay, you talk about that so emphatically, so I'm here, compelled to ask you this one very quickly, Dr. Nagao, that so how do you really see this whole transition from look east to act east, where not only the ASEAN nations are central to our policy, but the vice versa, the reciprocity of it?
Yeah, India is emerging. India's influence is also emerging. So in the past, India talked about only the regional country in the Indian Ocean. Now Indo-Pacific. Pacific side is a matter of India too. So expanding the topic. Because, of course, India's resources to deal with is increasing, but at the same time, India is very popular country in the Pacific side. That is another matter. So Japan like India, Australia like India, US like India, now South Pacific is also start to talk with India under the Modi. So in the past, when India talk about look east, this was the beginning of this policy, but now under the Act East policy, it is true that any Pacific region is the topic of the India's policy. So that is what happened. So when we talk about defense cooperation, my subject is military-related issue, but indeed in the past, Malabar exercises include in all Quad countries, but this is maritime cooperation. Now India holds Tarang Shakti Air Force cooperation. From maritime to air has happened. And space is the area of India has good, India has advantage in the space area because high technology related to the space. So from sea to air to space, cyber also, another new technology also.
Yeah, there's another barometer. There's another barometer, Dr. Nagao, where we can measure how ASEAN and India are trying to focus on the challenges that face the world, which the world woke up to in the wake of the COVID pandemic, and then there were other supply chain issues with semiconductors. We've seen Singapore and India doing something in that regard, but what about other ASEAN countries? Do you think that is an area that is largely unexplored for now between India and ASEAN as a grouping and the individual constituents as well?
Dr. Nagao, that one was for
That
you?
was for Shruti.
Okay.
Oh.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I thought it was for Dr. Nagao. No, I think that's a very that's a right sort of line of questioning, and I think what you're seeing is two things happening. One, at home, if you've seen what Prime Minister Modi's administration has tried to do, is set up this whole sort of mechanism to ensure that we are not just part of conversations talking about the rewiring of supply chains around semiconductors, but also get down to the brass tacks and create the ecosystem that helps in this process.
Yes, India wants to become a global production hub of semiconductors.
That's right. I think what we've seen is that, in Southeast Asia, because of the US sort of announcing the Inflation Reduction Act, which sort of brought down a little bit of sort of conditionality on how Southeast Asia could actually deal with China and what's the semiconductor sort of supply chains coming in. There was a little bit of worries as to what kind of position it puts them in. But countries like Vietnam have sort of seized the opportunity to sort of use that leverage to kickstart their own production processes and set up their own ecosystem, even in some cases with Chinese help. But what you're seeing is increasing interaction with countries from the West, with countries like Vietnam, and therefore conversations between us and Southeast Asian nations like Vietnam have started on the semiconductor sort of ecosystem. So whether it's Singapore, whether it's Vietnam, we've sort of isolated a few nations to have this sort of conversation going forward as to how we could collaborate and build and leverage on each other's strengths. So I think those conversations are starting. We have to get our whole ecosystem up and ready in respectively domestically at home for it to actually have the kind of impact that we're aiming to have. So this is going to be a long-term sort of project. But yes, definitely conversations on the same have been kick-started.
Okay,
yes.
So this year's theme has been connectivity and resilience. Let's also now a little bit focus on the discussions that are going to be taking place on the ASEAN table amongst the leadership, and particularly to just contextualize what all India is really going to put forth as far as the current theme is concerned, resilience and connectivity.
I think emphasis will be on digital connectivity, and physical connectivity, there are problems in Myanmar as far as India is concerned. And even on maritime, there are issues, it will take time. But the future is towards cyber, towards internet, and there are issues can also emerge. Like in Laos, we saw how some Indians were being lured for cyber crimes.
Yes.
And the Laos government was very helpful, and many of the Indians were sent back. But so it's very unknown territory, uncharted territory. whether I'm sure conversation will also be on artificial intelligence and all that new areas which are opening up.
Cybersecurity.
Many
as well.
cybersecurity, and many of these countries are high population countries. And how the employment will be impacted.
And,
as
and,
Prime
and their
Minister,
computer literacy is also high.
computer literacy is high, and as the Prime Minister says that all the policies have to be human centric, have to be centered on the welfare of the human being. I think all of our countries in ASEAN as well as elsewhere have to look at the impact of these new technologies which are coming up. And there this word resilience will acquire another meaning, that how do you that the impact of these new technologies should be for the benefit of the largest number of population, not for a very limited number of population. But resilience has acquired a meaning in the COVID disruption of supply chains. So the supply chain resilience is a very important issue, not over dependence on one or two manufacturers.
Now I think we are getting those visuals of resounding welcome put forth by for our Prime Minister Narendra Modi by the Indian diaspora, and I can see Prime Minister there interacting with not only Indian diaspora, the members of the Indian diaspora, but I think I can see some Lao nationals there also holding those tiny little Indian flags and Lao PDR flags.
Yes, and always they come bearing gifts for Prime Minister Modi, or they want an autograph or two on paintings. There are children too. You can see them interacting with the Prime Minister as well, and expressing how delighted they are that the Indian leader has come to Lao PDR. Again, getting all kinds of gifts which have a special meaning. They have mementos, of course, and everything has its own meaning there as well. And children, of course, PM Modi very fond of them, interacting with them, of all age groups really.
Absolutely.
You could see that there as well, Sakan.
You know, Ambassador Tal, I think one of the very rare world leaders who has such a personal, who strikes this personal chord wherever he lands, wherever he goes with the Indian diaspora. Look at the visuals, the personal connect is palpable, sir. And interestingly, we don't only get to see Gautam Indian flags there. I think I could also spot some Lao national flags as well. And
it's just how well integrated they are. The Indian
draped in Indian saris.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, there is a reason. All the people of Indian origin abroad want India to prosper, to become more successful. And Prime Minister,
just a pause. Let's try and listen in.
We just wanted to listen into what they were chanting or singing.
इंडिया पे रिसर्च कर रहे होते हैं, इस तरह के लोगों को बुलाते हैं.
Not just the Indian diaspora, even the people of Lao PDR there, where the Prime Minister Modi has arrived, and they greeted him in Hindi, in, as we say, Shuddha Hindi.
Pure Hindi.
Pure Hindi is how you can loosely translate it, literally translate it. And he said that the people of Lao PDR give him a very hearty welcome.
Yes. Just to quote those lines amidst the chanting of Bharat Mata Ki Jai, they said, Modi ji, aapka Lao mein hardik swagat hai. To translate it in Hindi, dear Modi ji, you are most welcome in Lao PDR. We saw those girls of the Lao descent draped in Indian saris, speaking in Hindi. There's a lot of civilizational linkages, aspect, connect in this particular ASEAN-India summit.
Yes?
Yes?
That was so sweet.
Yes.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And maybe in the Indian Cultural Center there may be a Hindi teacher, and there is a lot of effort to teach Hindi, and then this is reflected by these girls and...
Yes, certainly. And of course, not just...
Gayatri
the
Mantra.
Gayatri Mantra also being recited there.
PM is also chanting along with the...
This is not, Sakal, what we usually see when Prime Minister goes overseas. There is, of course, the Indian diaspora, which does come to greet him. But this is a little unusual, isn't it? The way that this sort of spiritual greeting has also been given to the Prime Minister, apart from a hearty welcome.
Yes.
Master Tayal, what do you have to say about that?
And just to add to what Gautam has said, sorry sir, I just interrupted you here, because you see these are Buddhist monks or children also. I mean, I think they are children of Lao descent again.
Yes.
Chanting so effortlessly Gayatri mantras, which is so integral to India's spiritual culture, and Ganesh Stuti, again very integral to India's spirituality and culture. And there is such a, I think there is a message here about India's global rise. And since we are talking about Laos, sir, or ASEAN nations, I think this is historical in many ways, would you say?
And Sanskrit shlokas, and they are very difficult to memorize and to correctly pronounce. It is really very, very impressive. That shows that there must be some ashram or some school or ICCR or somewhere these Laotian students or monks are getting some kind of a training, because otherwise it is not possible. So there is a lot of interest. There is a lot of interest in civilization, and now Buddhism is a little more prominent there, but the Buddhist roots are also Hinduism, and in Southeast Asia it was sort of interchanging. If you really see the evolution, the king will sometimes be a Buddhist, then his son may become a Hindu, and so it's almost same, but it is really heartwarming to see.
Very heartwarming. And Gautam, Prime Minister, chanting along with them.
Along with
them. He knows these.
I mean, look at this visual.
Mantras.
Look at this visual. Yes. Shruti, would you like to come in here as we stay with these beautiful visuals?
Sure. I think as the ambassador just mentioned, that India and Lao PDR obviously have a very long history of cultural, religious, and sort of people-to-people ties, and that's the expression of that cultural connect is what you're seeing during the Prime Minister's sort of visit, and it's very heartwarming. Also tells you that when we get caught up in the conversations on geopolitics and hard security, sort of the constant pushing back by the Prime Minister on the human connect and sort of the spiritual and civilizational linkages that India shares with the world, and sort of the ideas of, global good in global governance sort of resonate when you see such visuals. So I think, through sort of India's sort of revival of soft power linkages, I think these images are going to become more routine for us as Prime Minister makes these visits to various parts of the world. But certainly tells you that at the end of the day, while hard politics and security has its place, and it's always going to be on the top of the agenda on the negotiation table, it is these linkages that actually help cement the ties and take them forward.
Certainly. And Dr. Naga, if I could also bring you in on these images that we're playing out, just tell us, what do you make of this sort of, well, it's a phenomenon really, isn't it? The way India's culture has traveled across all the 7 seas, not just in the Indo-Pacific, through yoga, through traditional medicine, through spiritualism in general. How does that shape the perception of the modern day India, the rising India? It's not just about the kind of numbers that we have, the economic strength that sort of connotes and conveys the capabilities that India is trying to develop, but the richness of India's culture, its ancient links with the entire world.
Yes, I want to analyze this as a policy, because in the past we can find the same connection but not exploit it. So now, any place Prime Minister Modi visited, the Indian government holds big event to meet with the diaspora. So that is intended policy and good policy, I believe. So that's why connection has re-established, link has re-established. So link exists, but as a policy, how to use it is another matter, and India has succeeded under the Prime Minister Modi, I believe. So that's why this is very good and clever way, and flexible way, and creative way, I think.
Ambassador Dayal, Bharat Vishwaguru this is the thought which the first thought that came to mind when I looked at these visuals. I think this is also something which symbolizes that when Prime Minister, coined or used this word multiple times in his address.
Vedas are the first texts in the world, and 600 years before the current era, Lord Buddha, Mahavir. So in many ways, Guru Nanak, many thoughts have originated from India, which are very universal in their belief and application. We do not say one God only, or one. So that is what resonates. And eventually even the message of peace, whether it is non-violence, this is very unique. Vegetarianism is very unique for India.
Yes.
So there are so many things which are very inclusive, which have a connection with spirituality, and the message is universal in its appeal. And in the present world, there are so many tensions, so many frustrations. I think people of the world are looking towards the message which comes from India, that beyond simple material achievements there is something more for peace and for harmony, and that is a collective kind of a message which comes. And Vishwaguru, perhaps one may not say, but there are a lot of ideas and heritage.
Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam as well.
Yes.
Yes, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, absolutely, which is a very universal principle. And
these epithets being used by Prime Minister himself on different occasions, I think these are more visuals of one of the classical Indian dances on display there by, we don't know, these are Indian girls or girls of Lao descent performing specially for Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
So, different aspects of India being put to the fore, where Prime Minister Modi is being welcomed by not just the Indian diaspora there in Lao PDR, but also by the people, it seems, of Lao PDR. Lots of different themes coming through, not just spiritualism through the chanting of shlokas and mantras, but also these performances, this from India's northeast, which again has a very, very critical connection,
Yes.
Ambassador, with ASEAN and the entire Southeast Asian region. We're trying to connect it physically as well,
Yes.
although the problems in Myanmar are coming in the way.
So this could be Bihu from the
I think this is
northeastern state
Bihu,
of
so this
Assam.
is from Assam, and
Yes.
so it shows the connection of
Sir,
our
and
northeast.
interestingly, these are Lao descent girls performing for Prime Minister Modi. Please continue as we
So
stay with you.
normally we have a Indian cultural center in all of these countries. So my thought would be perhaps they have some teacher, but he or she is doing
very
a
good
great
teacher.
job, very great job, and the girls have danced so well, perfect coordination, very good choreography, and again the diversity of India. Yeah, normally we have teachers of Kathak or Bharatanatyam, but it's beautiful to have such excellent folk dances of Northeast. And after all, it is the Act East policy, so the connection, spiritual connection, economic connection, commercial connection, cultural connection.
I think this is a befitting welcome.
Absolutely
A
befitting.
befitting welcome. Shruti, would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we constantly talk about, India's Act East policy and linking sort of the Northeast, as you were discussing, with Southeast Asia and what a crucial role it plays. It shows you that if you go back to history, these linkages existed, and it's only, various parts of our, history where artificial cleavages were actually created once after the British occupation of India, and these linkages have always been organic, and so reviving them through culture and history, historical memory, is something that is serving us well. I think it also shows you that when India talks about itself as a Vishwamitra now, as a friend for all nations, thinking about global good, that these linkages are actually going to go far. A long way in reassuring people of this region about how India has had a very peaceful historical past with the region, and how it will continue to do so in a reassuring manner, building further on people-to-people ties. I was actually just looking at some figures as to what the Indian diaspora in Lao does, and they've actually quite seamlessly integrated into their society, from jewelry trade, hotels, industries, manufacturing, mining, plantations, private businesses, representing the country in international organizations. So I think there's a lot of connectivity. Even the defense cooperation has a human element in terms of capacity building and training. So there's a lot going on that can be leveraged in the relationship going forward.
Okay, same question for Dr. Nagao. If you can hear us, India's cultural footprints are clearly on display with such a befitting welcome accorded to Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, not only by the Indian diaspora but also by the nationals from Laos performing these. Okay, we're getting some more visuals of Prime Minister Modi amongst the monks there.
A sacred thread being tied, and the Prime Minister sitting across from these monks as well. So very, very different aspects to how India and Lao PDR really come together, being displayed right here when Prime Minister Modi has been welcomed in Lao PDR. I believe that is a brief glimpse of the kind of work that India's Archaeological Survey has been doing as well in terms of restoring World Heritage Site designated by UNESCO in Lao PDR over the last 15 years. And these are different aspects of how these ties have been intrinsic to the way India has been trying to develop relations, not just with Lao PDR, but multiple nations across Southeast Asia and the world.
Yes, and Buddhism is another aspect we were talking about, and I think that is also reflected in those visuals with Prime Minister spending some moment with those Buddhist monks there, which once again traces our deep civilizational linkages. And here we see Prime Minister himself interacting with the officials of the ASI there, who have done a brilliant job since many years in terms of restoring those artifacts there. And these are the visuals again with Prime Minister Modi amongst the Buddhist monks there, sacred thread being tied on Prime Minister's wrist. Many monks from Lao in fact still go to the Bodh Gaya to study reportedly. In fact, many of them are also pursuing Buddhist studies at the Nalanda University.
Yes, India is providing grants and scholarships for that purpose as well. And this is an ongoing process which could perhaps be enhanced further now that Prime Minister Modi is in Vientiane. And Basatel, that is one way that India has been growing its relations in terms of how education and other capacity building exercises are carried out, not just in countries like Lao PDR, but several other nations as well in the Indo-Pacific.
India is doing phenomenal work. Our iTech program, we give so many scholarships, in hundreds we give, capacity building. Again,
go ahead.
Again, the emphasis is on capacity building and strengthening the cultural connection, and also establishing a base, an academic base, so that there is more, there are so many manuscripts, for instance, in these countries which are in Pali, which are in Sanskrit, and they are just lost, they are just in their archives. So they need to be brought out, and because unfortunately in India many of these libraries were burned, like Nalanda and all of that. So original
because
manuscripts,
of different crusades of invaders.
just like they took these manuscripts and they are safe in their monasteries and countries. They need to be brought out. So there is so much work to be done to re-establish as well as to learn these linkages.
But under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, we have managed to get many of our artifacts back from many
United
countries.
States, from so many other countries. That is, so
recent one being United States.
Even from United States. So, and there is an awareness in other countries that what was done by stealing or by taking away these artifacts was not the right thing. So that realization is also there.
Okay. Shruti, if you could hear me, do you think the shared heritage is reflected in our ongoing cultural and robust development partnerships that we have, the partnership or the cooperation that we have had with the ASEAN nations in the last decade or so?
Sure, I think what we've been discussing is significant. One of the key pillars of India's engagement with ASEAN is been to leverage on the people-to-people ties. I mean, we can discuss how soft power has become one of those, whether it's, trying to sort of build up and trace historical linkages from whether it's the Indic sort of connect of Buddhism. We've had Indo-ASEAN artist camps happening. We've actually leveraged a lot on the space of the music sort of exchange. You have the Indo-ASEAN music festivals, cultural exchange programs, and also using Buddhism as sort of, and India's lasting impact on Buddhism as sort of a cultural connector between the two. There are a lot of public diplomacy initiatives already in play, whether it's the No India program, where you're sort of trying to familiarize Southeast Asian youth and with Indian culture. We've been doing a lot under the ASEAN rubric, also trying to connect our youth. For example, people from the NCC. The NCC cadets have been involved, I think, last year in projects which involve understanding global climate change, how nations can come together, how can we have marine plastic pollution responses curated with the help of youth collaborating from these nations. So it's really taken very diverse and imaginative and creative forms in terms of sort of connecting these partnerships between ASEAN nations and India.
Yes, certainly. And again, in terms of a kickoff for the visit, Dr. Naga, how do you really interpret this sort of a welcome that Prime Minister Modi's got in Lao PDR, and what does it really foretell
culturally
for the kind of interactions and exchanges he'll have in the coming 2 days?
I think one of the features of the Indian culture is inclusive, and the Indian accept diversity. That's why India can accept other culture as their culture too. So that's why the global network has established in other country and other cultural space because of this India's feature, in the cultural feature. India can be global because India's culture is inclusive and accepts diversity. That's what happened, I believe. So this feature, as a policy, this feature, now India government is investing as a holding big meeting as a policy. That is a proper policy, I believe. And so potential of the Indian culture is now fruitful. And as a policy, this is the political achievement of the Indian government, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. On that note, I'd like to thank all our guests, Ambassador Tayal here and Professor Yu there, Dr. Nagao, and also Shruti Pandalai. Thank you for joining us through this special broadcast to talk about the kind of interactions that are expected to take place in the coming, 2 days of engagements that Prime Minister Modi will have in Vientiane, Lao PDR.
Well, now the focus shifts to the hard symmetry, where we will be keeping you updated as far as Prime Minister's attendance or participation at the ASEAN-India Summit is concerned. That's the big ticket event that we are looking at, and also that would be followed by those crucial bilaterals that Indian Prime Minister is going to have with his top leadership of Japan and New Zealand. All that on the other side. Me and Gautam are taking a very short breather. We'll be back with more. Don't go away. Stay with us.